Every few years, someone says it. We're living in 1984. It gets thrown around so casually that it almost loses meaning. But here's the thing. Most people who say that don't actually remember what Orwell was warning about. They remember the aesthetic, Big Brother, surveillance cameras, totalitarian vibes. But Orwell wasn't writing about technology. He was writing about power. And more specifically, about power that wants to control reality itself. So instead of asking, is Trump Big Brother, let's ask something more uncomfortable. Are we living in a political culture where reality itself feels negotiable? Orwell wrote an essay called Politics and the English Language. His argument was simple. Corrupt language corrupts thought. Not because people are stupid, but because words shape the boundaries of what feels thinkable. In 1984, they invent Newspeak, a language designed to shrink vocabulary so rebellion becomes literally unthinkable. Now, obviously, we don't have Newspeak, but we do have compressed language. Make America great again. When was America great? For who? Compared to what? The power of that phrase is its vagueness. It allows millions of people to project their own nostalgia into it. That's political brilliance. But here's the Orwellian tension. When slogans replace conversation, when criticism becomes betrayal, when disagreement becomes disloyalty, language stops being communication and starts being control. And this isn't unique to MAGA. Every movement uses language strategically. The question isn't who uses slogans. The question is, when do slogans become shields against reality? In Orwell's world, there is always an enemy. The enemy changes, but there must always be one. Because fear unifies, fear simplifies, fear justifies. In modern MAGA rhetoric, there's a recurring theme: the radical left, the corrupt media, the globalists, the deep state. Now, defining opponents is normal in politics. Democracy requires opposition. But here's the line. Are your opponents wrong, or are they existential threats? Because once politics becomes existential, compromise feels like surrender. And once compromise feels like surrender, power begins to justify itself as protection. Protection of the nation, protection of identity, protection of real Americans. And when politics frames itself as survival, people become willing to tolerate things they wouldn't normally tolerate. That's not dictatorship, that's drift. And drift is more dangerous because it feels gradual. In Orwell's world, there is always an enemy. The enemy changes, but there must always be one. Because fear unifies, fear simplifies, fear justifies. In modern MAGA rhetoric, there's a recurring theme: the radical left, the corrupt media, the globalists, the deep state. Now, defining opponents is normal in politics. Democracy requires opposition. But here's the line. Are your opponents wrong, or are they existential threats? Because once politics becomes existential, compromise feels like surrender. And once compromise feels like surrender, power begins to justify itself as protection. Protection of the nation, protection of identity, protection of real Americans. And when politics frames itself as survival, people become willing to tolerate things they wouldn't normally tolerate. That's not dictatorship, that's drift. And drift is more dangerous because it feels gradual. Let's slow down. It's easy to overreach here. The United States is not a totalitarian state. We have a functioning judiciary. We have investigative journalism. We have elections. In 1984, there is no resistance. Here, resistance is constant. That distinction matters. But Orwell's warning was never, you will wake up one day in a dictatorship. His warning was, freedom erodes quietly, through normalization, through repetition, through exhaustion. When people get tired, when outrage becomes routine, when facts become optional. That's when power expands not because it's forced, but because it's tolerated. The scariest thing in 1984 isn't the surveillance. It's the moment Winston finally says, "I love Big Brother." That's the end. Not when he's tortured, when he agrees. Orwell understood something fundamental. Authoritarianism doesn't begin with violence. It begins with loyalty tests. Who are you loyal to? The leader or the truth? In highly polarized environments, loyalty becomes identity, and identity becomes reality. That's why phrases like "believe him, not your lying eyes" feel familiar in modern politics. When courts rule against your side, are they corrupt? When media reports something negative, is it fake? When experts disagree, are they enemies? Once trust collapses, power fills the vacuum. And that dynamic is not exclusive to Trump. It's not exclusive to MAGA. It's present across modern politics. But the MAGA movement is a particularly clear example of identity-driven loyalty politics, where the leader becomes a symbol of cultural resistance. And when leaders become symbols, criticism feels like attack.
Orwell didn't hate conservatives. He didn't hate liberals. He hated authoritarian instincts, left or right. His fear was this: what happens when truth becomes secondary to power? When winning matters more than accuracy? When identity matters more than evidence? That's not just a Trump question. That's a modern democracy question. Because social media amplifies outrage. Algorithms reward certainty. And certainty is addictive. 2 + 2 = 4 is boring. 2 + 2 = whatever your side says? That's tribal. And tribal feels powerful. So no, we are not living in 1984. But we are living in a time where truth feels flexible, where language is weaponized, where politics feels existential. And that's exactly the kind of climate Orwell warned about. The real danger isn't Big Brother. It's the moment we stop caring whether 2 + 2 still equals 4. Because once reality becomes optional, power doesn't need chains. It just needs belief. And belief is much harder to resist.